The Wyoming wind cut through Samuel Mackenzie like a blade, carrying with it the promise of the worst blizzard the territory had seen in years. He pulled his coat tighter as he rode along the eastern boundary of his ranch, checking the fence posts one last time before the storm hit in full force. The sky had turned an ominous grey-black, and the first fat snowflakes were already beginning to fall. Sam had built his reputation in these parts by following 3 simple rules: work hard, mind your own business, and never trust strangers. The last rule had served him particularly well. In 1885, the Wyoming Territory was still wild country, filled with cattle rustlers, outlaws, and drifters looking for easy targets. His ranch, the Double M, sprawled across 15,000 acres of prime grazing land, making it a tempting prize for the wrong kind of men. As his horse Thunder picked his way carefully along the frozen ground, Sam's weathered hands gripped the reins with practiced ease. At 42, he'd spent half his life building this ranch from nothing, and he wasn't about to lose it to sentiment or foolish decisions. His ranch hands respected him because he was fair but firm, and they knew he'd never put them in unnecessary danger. The wind suddenly shifted, carrying with it a sound that made Sam pull Thunder to a halt. Was that crying? He strained his ears against the howling wind, wondering if he'd imagined it. There it was again, definitely human, and definitely in distress. "Easy, boy," Sam murmured to Thunder as the horse shifted nervously beneath him. Following the sound, Sam guided his horse toward a section of fence about 50 yards ahead. What he saw there made his blood run cold. Collapsed against one of his fence posts was a woman, her dark hair matted with snow and ice. She was clearly pregnant, very pregnant, and her lips had taken on a dangerous blue tint. Her clothes were torn and inadequate for the brutal Wyoming winter, and she was shivering so violently that Sam could see it from his saddle. "Please," she gasped when she saw him approaching, struggling to push herself upright against the post. Her accent was thick, Mexican, and her English was broken but desperate. "Please, Senor, I need help. My baby." Every instinct Sam had developed over 20 years of frontier life screamed at him to ride away. This was exactly the kind of situation that led to trouble: desperate strangers appearing out of nowhere with sob stories and hidden agendas. How many ranchers had been robbed or killed by men using women as bait? But as he looked down at her, Sam saw something that gave him pause. Her eyes held genuine terror, but not the calculating fear of someone running a con. This was the raw, primal fear of a mother protecting her unborn child. Her hands were pressed protectively over her swollen belly, and the way she looked at him wasn't scheming. It was pleading. "How long have you been out here?" Sam asked, dismounting despite his better judgment. The woman was clearly in the advanced stages of pregnancy, and hypothermia was setting in fast. 2 days, she whispered, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely speak. "Maybe 3. I lost count. Please, I just need somewhere warm for my baby to be born. I won't steal nothing, I swear by the Virgin Mary." Sam's jaw tightened. 2 days in this weather would kill most grown men, let alone a pregnant woman. The fact that she was still alive spoke to an inner strength that commanded respect. He found himself studying her face more carefully. High cheekbones, determined jaw, eyes that had seen too much suffering for someone who couldn't be more than 25. "What's your name?" he asked, though he wasn't sure why it mattered. "Maria," she replied, attempting to stand but swaying dangerously. "Maria Santos. Please, senor, I don't ask for much. Just until my baby comes. I can work, I can cook, I can—" Her words were cut off as her knees gave out, and she would have fallen if Sam hadn't moved quickly to catch her. The moment his hands touched her arms, he could feel how cold she was, cold enough that he wondered how she was still conscious. "Jesus Christ," he muttered under his breath, looking around at the empty prairie. The nearest town was 20 miles away, and the storm was getting worse by the minute. Even if he wanted to take her somewhere else, they'd never make it in this weather. Sam Mackenzie had always prided himself on making logical, calculated decisions. But as he looked at Maria Santos, collapsed in his arms with snow beginning to pile on her dark hair, he realized that some choices couldn't be made with the head alone. "Can you ride?" he asked, already knowing what he was going to do, despite every rational thought in his head. Maria nodded weakly, though Sam doubted she had the strength to stay in a saddle. Making a decision that would change both their lives forever, he lifted her as gently as he could and helped her onto Thunder behind him. As they rode toward the ranch house, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he was making the biggest mistake of his life. But when he felt Maria's arms tighten around his waist and heard her whispered, "Gracias, señor," he knew that mistake or not, it was the only choice his conscience would let him live with. The Double M Ranch house came into view just as the blizzard hit with full force, and Sam urged Thunder faster, racing against time and weather to get Maria to safety before it was too late. Thus Samsartana Chapter 2, Breaking the Rules. The warmth of the ranch house hit Maria like a physical force as Sam helped her through the heavy wooden door. After days in the brutal Wyoming cold, the heat from the stone fireplace felt like salvation itself. Her legs nearly buckled again, but Sam's strong arm kept her steady as he guided her toward a chair near the fire. "Rosa," Sam called out, his voice carrying through the house. "Rosa, I need you." Within moments, a sturdy Mexican woman in her 50s appeared from the kitchen, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. Rosa Mendoza had been the Double M's cook and housekeeper for 8 years, and Sam had never seen her at a loss for words, until now. "Dios mío," Rosa breathed, crossing herself as she took in Maria's condition. "Sam, what have you done?" "Found her collapsed at the east fence," Sam replied curtly, helping Maria settle into the chair. "She's been out there for days and she's about to give birth." Rosa immediately shifted into action, her maternal instincts overriding any questions about the wisdom of bringing a stranger into their home. "We need to get her warm and dry, and we need to check on the baby." She knelt beside Maria, switching to rapid Spanish. Sam didn't understand most of what passed between the two women, but he could see Rosa's expression growing increasingly concerned. When she finally looked up at him, her dark eyes were troubled. "Her baby could come any time," Rosa said quietly. "Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. She's been through something terrible, Sam. Look at her hands." For the first time, Sam really looked at Maria's hands as she held them toward the fire. Her palms were cut and bloodied, her fingernails broken and caked with dirt. These weren't the hands of someone who had simply gotten lost. These were the hands of someone who had been running, fighting, clawing for survival. "Maria," Sam said gently, pulling up another chair, "I need you to tell me the truth. Who's chasing you?" Maria's eyes darted between Sam and Rosa, fear flickering across her features. "How do you know someone chases me?" "Because women don't end up half dead in the middle of Wyoming winter by accident," Sam replied. "And because I've seen enough trouble to recognize it when it walks through my door." For a long moment Maria said nothing, her hands instinctively moving to protect her belly. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "3 men killed my husband 2 weeks ago in Colorado Territory. I saw them do it." Her voice broke, and tears began streaming down her cheeks. "Miguel was just trying to protect our little bit of money. They shot him down like a dog, and then they saw me hiding behind our wagon." Rosa made a soft sound of sympathy and moved to put a comforting arm around Maria's shoulders. "They've been following me ever since," Maria continued. "I can't go to the law. One of them, he wears a deputy's badge. They want to kill me because I can identify them. I thought maybe if I could get far enough away, find somewhere to have my baby in peace." Sam felt his jaw tighten. He'd suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed made the situation infinitely more complicated. Harboring a witness to murder, especially when one of the killers was a lawman, was the kind of decision that could get everyone on the ranch killed. "Sam," Rosa said quietly in English, reading his thoughts, "she's just a girl, and she's about to have a baby. We can't turn her out. And we can't fight off 3 armed men looking for blood money," Sam replied, though even as he said it, he knew he'd already made his choice back at the fence line. The sound of horses approaching made all 3 of them freeze. Sam moved quickly to the window, peering through the curtain at the swirling snow. Through the white curtain of the storm, he could make out the shapes of his ranch hands, returning from their final preparations for the blizzard. "It's just my men," he told Maria, seeing her face go white with terror. "But I need you to stay quiet while I figure out what to do." The front door burst open, bringing with it a swirl of snow and 3 half-frozen ranch hands. Jack Morrison, Sam's foreman, stomped the snow off his boots, while the other 2 men, Pete and Carlos, shook off their coats. "Hell of a storm coming, boss," Jack said, then stopped short when he saw Maria huddled by the fire. "Well, I'll be damned." "Who's this?" Jack Morrison was a good man and a loyal foreman, but he was also practical to a fault. Sam could already see the questions forming in his weathered face, questions that would need to be answered carefully. "This is Maria," Sam said simply. She needed help. Jack's eyes narrowed as he took in Maria's condition and the obvious signs that she'd been through an ordeal. Help with what exactly? With not dying in a blizzard, Sam replied, his tone making it clear the discussion was over. But Jack wasn't easily deterred. He'd been with Sam for 6 years, and he knew his boss well enough to sense when something was seriously wrong. "Sam, can I have a word with you, private-like?" Sam nodded reluctantly and followed Jack into the kitchen, leaving Rosa to tend to Maria. The moment they were out of earshot, Jack let him have it. "What the hell are you thinking?" Jack demanded in a harsh whisper. "You don't know this woman from Eve and you bring her into our home. What if she's working with rustlers? What if this is all some kind of setup?" "She's about to give birth, Jack," Sam replied, "and she's been running for her life." "Running from who and why?" "Sam, you've always been the one telling us to be careful, to not trust strangers. Now you break your own rules for some woman you found at the fence?" Sam stared out the kitchen window at the storm, knowing Jack was right to question him. Every logical part of his mind agreed with his foreman's concerns, but he kept seeing Maria's eyes, the desperate love of a mother willing to die for her unborn child. "Sometimes the right choice isn't the safe choice," Sam said finally. Jack studied his boss's face for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "This is about your Sarah, isn't it?" The mention of his late wife's name hit Sam like a physical blow. Sarah had died in childbirth 8 years ago, along with their son. It was a loss that had nearly destroyed him, and everyone on the ranch knew it. "This isn't about Sarah," Sam said quietly, but even he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "The hell it isn't," Jack replied, though his tone had softened. "Sam, I understand the urge to help, but if this woman brings trouble to our door, we need to be ready for it. What aren't you telling me?" Before Sam could answer, a sharp cry from the main room sent both men rushing back. Maria was doubled over in the chair, her face contorted in pain, while Rosa knelt beside her with a look of alarm. "The baby," Rosa said urgently. "It's coming. Now!" As if the weather outside wasn't challenging enough, Sam Mackenzie was about to face the most difficult night of his life, and he still had no idea if he'd made a terrible mistake that would cost them all everything. Chapter 3. Birth in the Storm. The blizzard raged outside with a fury that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ranch house, but inside, all attention was focused on Maria as another contraction gripped her. Rosa had taken charge with the calm efficiency of a woman who had delivered many babies, quickly transforming the main room into a makeshift birthing chamber. "Jack, you and the boys need to make yourselves scarce," Sam ordered, helping Rosa move cushions and blankets to make Maria more comfortable. "This isn't a place for men right now. Boss, with all due respect, if trouble comes calling in this storm, you're gonna need every gun you can get," Jack replied, though he was already backing toward the door. "We'll be in the bunkhouse, but we'll keep watch." Pete and Carlos had already disappeared, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. As the door closed behind his men, Sam found himself alone with Rosa and Maria, feeling more helpless than he had in years. "Sam," Rosa said firmly, "I need you to heat water and find clean cloth, lots of it, and there's laudanum in the medicine chest if the pain gets too bad." Maria gripped Sam's hand with surprising strength as another wave of pain hit her. "No laudanum," she gasped in English, her accent thick with strain. I need to stay awake, in case they come." Even in the throes of labor, her fear of her pursuers was overwhelming. Sam found himself admiring her strength, even as he worried about what kind of men could inspire such terror in a woman about to give birth. "No one's getting through this storm tonight," Sam assured her, though he wasn't entirely certain of that himself. "You focus on your baby." For the next 3 hours, the ranch house became a world unto itself. Rosa moved between English and Spanish, coaching Maria through each contraction, while Sam did whatever was needed, heating water, gathering supplies, and trying to stay out of the way. The storm outside seemed to intensify with each of Maria's cries, as if nature itself was responding to the drama unfolding within. "She's strong, this one," Rosa murmured to Sam during a brief respite between contractions. "But she's scared of more than just the birth." "What did she tell you?" Sam quickly filled Rosa in on Maria's story. The murdered husband, the 3 killers, the corrupt deputy. Rosa's expression grew increasingly grim as she listened. "Those kind of men, they don't give up easy," Rosa said quietly. "If they've followed her this far." Her words were cut off by Maria's sudden cry. "The baby. I can feel the baby." What followed was a blur of activity that Sam would remember for the rest of his life. Rosa's calm commands, Maria's incredible strength despite her exhaustion, and finally, just as the storm reached its peak fury outside, the sharp, clear cry of a newborn baby. "It's a girl," Rosa announced, tears streaming down her cheeks as she held up the tiny, perfect child. "She's beautiful, Maria. Absolutely beautiful." Maria sobbed with relief and exhaustion as Rosa placed the baby in her arms. Despite everything she had endured, despite the terror and loss of the past weeks, Maria's face transformed with pure, radiant joy as she looked at her daughter. "Elena," Maria whispered, pressing her lips to the baby's forehead. "Her name is Elena, after my grandmother." Sam found himself deeply moved by the scene, remembering his own brief taste of fatherhood before tragedy struck. But his moment of peace was shattered by the sound he'd been dreading, horses approaching through the storm. The baby's cries had stopped, but now Sam could hear something else, the sound of men's voices calling out through the wind. Jack appeared at the kitchen door, his face grim and his rifle in his hands. "Boss, we got company," he said quietly. "3 riders, just pulled up outside. They're asking about a pregnant Mexican woman." Maria's face went white with terror, and she instinctively pulled her newborn daughter closer to her chest. "They found me," she whispered. "Dios mío, they found me." Sam felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. He'd known this moment might come, but he'd hoped the storm would give them more time. Now he had to decide just how far he was willing to go to protect a woman and child he barely knew. "Rosa, take Maria and the baby into the back bedroom," he ordered quietly. "Keep them quiet and don't come out no matter what you hear." "Sam," Maria grabbed his arm with desperate strength. "Please, don't let them take me. My baby. She needs her mother." Looking into Maria's eyes, Sam made the second life-changing decision in less than 24 hours. "They won't touch you or your daughter," he promised. "I give you my word." As Rosa helped Maria to her feet and guided her toward the back of the house, Sam checked his gun and tried to prepare himself for what was coming. Outside, he could hear the men dismounting and approaching the front door. "Jack," Sam called quietly. "How many men do we have ready to fight?" "Me, Pete, Carlos, and you," Jack replied. "Against 3, but boss, if one of them really is a deputy, then we better make sure we're in the right," Sam finished. He moved to the front window and peered out through the curtain. 3 men stood on his porch, snow swirling around them. Even in the storm, he could see they were hard men, the kind who killed for money and didn't lose sleep over it. The knock on the door came hard and demanding. Sam took a deep breath, opened the door just wide enough to show his face, and prepared to face the most dangerous conversation of his life. Chapter 4. Confrontation in the dark. The man standing on Sam's porch was everything Maria's terrified descriptions had suggested and worse. Tall and lean with cold, calculating eyes, he wore a deputy's badge pinned to his coat, though something about the way he wore it suggested the authority behind it was questionable at best. His 2 companions flanked him like wolves, their hands resting casually on their gun belts despite the freezing wind. "Evening," the deputy said, his voice carrying false politeness that didn't reach his eyes. "Name's Deputy Clayton Hayes. We're tracking a fugitive. Mexican woman, pregnant, might have been through these parts." Sam kept his expression neutral, though his heart was hammering in his chest. Behind him, he could sense Jack positioning himself where he could get a clear shot if needed, while Pete and Carlos would be watching from the bunkhouse windows. "Hell of a night to be tracking anyone," Sam replied, not opening the door any wider. "What's this woman supposed to have done?" "Murder," Hayes said flatly. "Killed her husband and took off with money she stole. We've been following her trail for 2 weeks." Sam had to admire the man's ability to lie with such conviction, but he'd heard enough liars in his time to recognize the signs. Hayes' story was too smooth, too practiced, and it directly contradicted everything Maria had told them. "Haven't seen any pregnant Mexican women," Sam said. But then again, not many folks stupid enough to travel in weather like this. Hayes studied Sam's face carefully, looking for any sign of deception. "Mind if we take a look around just to be thorough?" "Actually, I do mind," Sam replied, his tone hardening. "This is private property, and I don't let armed strangers into my home in the middle of the night, deputy or not." The temperature on the porch seemed to drop even further as Hayes' false politeness evaporated. "Now, that's not very neighborly, friend. We're just trying to do our job." "Then do it somewhere else," Sam said firmly. "Like I told you, there's no pregnant woman here. One of Hayes's companions, a stocky man with a scarred face, took a step closer. "Maybe we didn't make ourselves clear, mister. We ain't asking." Sam's hand moved casually to rest on his gun butt. "And maybe you didn't hear me clear. This is my land, and you're not welcome on it." The tension stretched taut between the men, broken only by the howling of the wind. Sam could see Hayes calculating odds, weighing the potential resistance against the value of his prey. Finally, the corrupt deputy smiled, a cold expression that held no warmth. "Your choice, friend," Hayes said, "but you should know that harboring a fugitive is a serious crime. Could see a man hanged for it." "Could see a man hanged for a lot of things," Sam replied evenly, "including murder." Hayes's eyes narrowed at the implication, but before he could respond, the unmistakable sound of a baby crying drifted from somewhere inside the house. Sam's blood turned to ice as he saw the triumphant gleam that appeared in Hayes's eyes. "Funny thing about babies," Hayes said, his voice now openly menacing. "They don't much care about lying to deputies, do they?" Sam knew the game was up, but he wasn't about to fold without a fight. "My cook's got a new grandchild visiting," he lied smoothly. "Baby's been colicky all week." "Uh-huh," Hayes replied, clearly not believing a word. "Well then, you won't mind if we come in and congratulate the new grandmother?" The scarred man was already pushing past Sam into the house when Jack appeared from the kitchen, rifle in hand, and pointed directly at Hayes's chest. "I'd stay right where you are if I were you," Jack said quietly. The situation exploded into chaos as Hayes's other companion drew his gun, only to find himself staring down the barrels of rifles held by Pete and Carlos, who had slipped in through the back door. For a moment, the 6 men stood frozen in a deadly tableau, each waiting for someone else to make the first move. "You boys are making a serious mistake," Hayes said, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. "I'm a duly appointed deputy, and you're interfering with the law." "Funny thing about that badge," Sam said, studying Hayes carefully. "Something about it doesn't look quite right, almost like it came from a dead man." Hayes's face went pale, confirming Sam's suspicions. He'd seen enough real lawmen to know when someone was wearing stolen authority. From the back of the house came the sound of Elena crying again, and Sam saw Maria appear in the doorway to the kitchen, her newborn daughter in her arms. Despite Rosa's attempts to keep her hidden, the new mother had apparently decided she couldn't cower while men fought over her fate. "You want me?" Maria said, her voice shaking but determined. "Here I am, but you leave these good people alone." Hayes smiled coldly as he saw her. "There's the lying little bitch. Maria Santos, you're under arrest for the murder of Miguel Santos and theft of—" "The murder of her own husband?" Sam interrupted, his voice filled with disgust. "That's the best story you could come up with?" "Miguel Santos was a good man," Maria cried out, fresh tears streaming down her face. "He never hurt nobody. You killed him because he wouldn't tell you where we hid our money." "Shut your mouth, woman," the scarred man snarled, taking a step toward her. He never made it. Sam's fist connected with the man's jaw in a blow that sent him sprawling across the floor. In the confusion that followed, Hayes went for his gun, but Jack was faster, the sound of his rifle shot echoing through the house like thunder. Hayes stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, while his remaining companion found himself facing 3 rifles and wisely chose to raise his hands in surrender. "Now then," Sam said, breathing hard as he stood over Hayes, "let's hear the real story about Miguel Santos." As the storm continued to rage outside, Sam Mackenzie realized that his decision to help a desperate woman had drawn him into something far more dangerous than he'd imagined. But looking at Maria clutching her newborn daughter, he knew he'd make the same choice again, no matter what it cost him. Chapter 5. Dawn after the storm. The first grey light of dawn was beginning to filter through the windows when Sam finally allowed himself to believe they'd survived the night. Hayes sat slumped in a chair, his wounded shoulder roughly bandaged, while his 2 companions were tied up in the corner under Pete's watchful guard. The storm had finally begun to weaken, though snow still fell steadily outside. Maria sat near the fire, little Elena sleeping peacefully in her arms. Despite everything she'd been through, the flight across the territory, giving birth in a stranger's house and facing down her husband's killers, she looked serene for the first time since Sam had found her at the fence. Rosa bustled around the kitchen, preparing breakfast for everyone, as if armed confrontations in the middle of the night were perfectly normal occurrences. "So, what's the real story, Hayes?" Sam asked, settling into a chair across from the wounded man. "And don't waste my time with more lies about Maria killing her husband." Hayes glared at him with undisguised hatred, pressing his good hand against his bandaged shoulder. "Go to hell, Mackenzie." "Already been there," Sam replied calmly. "It was the 3 years I spent building this ranch from nothing. Now I've got a choice to make. I can turn you over to the real law in Cheyenne, or I can let Jack and the boys take you out behind the barn and save everyone the trouble of a trial." "What's it gonna be?" The scarred man, whose name turned out to be Dutch Keller, proved more talkative than his leader. "We was just supposed to rob them," he said quickly, earning a murderous look from Hayes. The Mexican and his wife had been flashing money around Denver, talking about buying land. Hayes said it would be easy, but Miguel fought back, Maria said quietly, her voice heavy with pain. "He was trying to protect me and our baby." "The damn fool should have just handed over the money," the third man, a weaselly individual named Tommy Pike, added. "Instead, he goes for his gun, and Hayes puts 2 bullets in him." "Shut up, you idiots," Hayes snarled, but the damage was done. Jack spat into the fireplace with disgust. "So you killed a man for what, a few $100s?" $3,000, Dutch admitted. They'd sold their farm back in Texas and were heading to California to start fresh. Sam felt his anger burning cold and steady. 3 men had killed Miguel Santos and terrorized his pregnant wife over money that represented a young couple's entire future, their dreams, their hopes, their chance at a better life. "Maria," Sam said gently, "is that what happened?" She nodded, tears flowing freely now. "Miguel tried to give them half the money, said we needed the rest for the baby. But Hayes, he wanted it all. When Miguel said no, Hayes shot him. Then he saw me hiding behind our wagon and he said—" She paused, struggling with the memory. "What did he say, Maria?" "He said dead women tell no tales, but maybe he'd have some fun with me first." Her voice was barely a whisper, but every man in the room heard her clearly. The silence that followed was broken only by the crackling of the fire and Elena's soft breathing. Finally, Jack spoke, his voice deadly quiet. "Boss, maybe we should reconsider that trip behind the barn." Sam was tempted. God knew he was tempted. But he'd built his reputation on doing things the right way, even when the wrong way would be easier. "No," he said finally. "We do this legal. Pete, I want you to ride to Cheyenne as soon as the weather clears. Tell Sheriff Morrison we've got 3 men wanted for murder and robbery. Tommy here seems eager to talk so he can tell his story to a real judge." Hayes laughed bitterly. "You think this ends here, Mackenzie? You think turning us in makes you safe? I got friends and they know I was tracking the woman. When I don't come back, then they'll find 3 graves and a mystery," Sam replied coldly. "Lot of things can happen to men stupid enough to travel in blizzards." It was an empty threat and everyone knew it, but it served to shut Hayes up. The real problem, Sam realized, was what came next. Even if Hayes and his men went to prison, Maria would never truly be safe. There would always be the fear that someone else might come looking for her, or that Hayes might eventually get out and want revenge. "Maria," Sam said, turning to face her, "what are your plans now? Do you have family somewhere? People who can take you in?" She shook her head sadly. "Miguel's family never accepted me because I'm Mexican. My family, they died in a fever when I was young. There's no one." Rosa, who had been quietly listening while she cooked, suddenly spoke up. "She could stay here." Everyone turned to look at her in surprise, but Rosa continued with calm determination. "This ranch is big enough for 2 women, and I'm not getting any younger. I could use help with the cooking and cleaning, especially during roundup season." Sam felt something shift inside his chest at the suggestion. The idea of Maria and her daughter staying at the Double M felt right in a way he couldn't quite explain, but he also knew it would complicate everything. "Maria, what do you think?" he asked. "Would you want to stay?" Maria looked around the room, at Rosa's kind face, at Jack and the other ranch hands who had risked their lives for her, and finally at Sam himself. "You would do this? Let us stay? Even after all the trouble we brought?" "Trouble has a way of finding good people," Sam replied. "Might as well face it together." "But I have no money to pay you," Maria protested. "Miguel's money, it's still hidden where Hayes couldn't find it, but—" "Keep your money," Sam said firmly. "Use it to build a future for Elena. As for payment, Rosa's right. We can use the help around here, and—" He paused, surprising himself with what he was about to say. "This house has been too quiet for too long." As if to emphasize his point, Elena chose that moment to wake up and add her voice to the conversation. with a healthy cry that made everyone smile despite the seriousness of the situation. "Looks like she's got opinions about staying," Rosa laughed, moving to help Maria with the baby. Outside, the storm was finally breaking, and shafts of golden sunlight were beginning to pierce the clouds. Sam walked to the window and looked out over his ranch, his land, his life's work, his sanctuary. For 8 years, it had been a place of solitude and hard work, a refuge from the pain of loss. Now, as he listened to Maria softly singing a Spanish lullaby to her daughter, while Rosa fussed over them both, Sam realized that sanctuary could mean something different than he'd thought. Sometimes it wasn't about hiding from the world. Sometimes it was about opening your door to someone who needed shelter from the storm. "Boss," Jack said quietly, joining him at the window. "You sure about this? Having them stay permanent-like?" Sam watched as Maria looked up from her baby and smiled at something Rosa had said. It was the first genuine smile he'd seen from her, and it transformed her entire face. She was beautiful, he realized. Not just pretty, but beautiful in the way that came from strength and kindness and an unbreakable spirit. "Yeah, Jack," Sam said finally. "I'm sure." 3 hours later, Pete rode out toward Cheyenne with Hayes and his men tied in the back of a wagon, while Tommy Pike sang like a canary about every crime they'd committed from Denver to Wyoming. Maria stood on the porch holding Elena, watching them go with obvious relief. "It's over," Sam said, joining her on the porch. "No," Maria replied, but she was smiling. "It's beginning." As the wagon disappeared into the distance and the sun climbed higher into the clear blue sky, Sam Mackenzie realized that sometimes breaking your own rules was the only way to discover who you really were. He'd always believed that minding your own business was the key to survival on the frontier, but Maria Santos and her daughter had taught him something different. Sometimes survival meant opening your heart wide enough to let in the people who needed you most, and discovering that you needed them just as much. The Double M Ranch was still the same 15,000 acres of Wyoming territory it had always been, but as Sam watched Maria laugh at something Rosa called out from the kitchen while Elena gurgled contentedly in her arms, he knew that everything had changed. And for the first time in 8 years, change felt like hope.